we remain open in the divine and holy name of the Almighty Creator, Master Wallace Tifar Muhammad, and in the name of his last and greatest messenger, the glorious, most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Holy Spirit of truth, Ansarel Muhammad, the Select One, the Allah Master J-Man. I greet my beloved family in the nation's greeting words of peace as spoken in paradise and the salute of the angels. Sajad Allahu and Assalamu Alaikum to the degree of the Creator's master plan. Today, we want to discuss the Ansarel Muhammad unity process and how the Great Wedding is preceded by cleaning up the divine name and preparing the bride to meet the groom. This is a perfect subject to culminate our 2021 Savior's Day season, which we also understand to be the fulfillment of the great day of decision. Regarding the Ansarel Muhammad unity process, our beloved messenger teaches us in Message to the Black Man, chapter 79. We must forget about trying to do for others before doing that which we have not done for ourselves, which is to establish love and unity in our brotherhood. You rise up and yell out in ignorance against yourself when you say that you want unity, love, and brotherhood of the nations. Those nations look at you where disunity is the order of the day and see your dislike of self and kind. You are an ignorant and foolish people. Your first desire should be love of self instead of love for those other than of your own. If you do not love your own brother, who is of your flesh and blood, how can other than your own flesh and blood accept your love and brotherhood? First, love thyself and thine own brother as thyself, and others will love you. He then states, in Message to the Black Man, chapter 61, they follow the poor teacher of Islam seeking a way or an excuse to kill him. They put spies, stool pigeons, on him to try to find a way to charge him with something other than the truth in order to do him evil for the truth's sake that he teaches. As David says in Psalms chapter 94 verse 20, shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law? The poor lost found members of the tribe of Shabazz, nicknamed Negroes by their slave masters, can well understand that they are victims of such a frame-up against them throughout America when they seek truth, love, and unity among themselves. The white race does not want to see the poor black people of America united in Islam, a religion that is of Allah, God, backed by the spirit and power of God, to unite all of its believers into one nation of brotherhood. End quote. Then one last quote to qualify the solution given to us as an opening orientation to the ultimate process of open acknowledgement in the antitypical atonement given to us by the Allah Master J-Man himself. The messenger teaches us that we must receive a knowledge that guides us to overcome the divisive tactics of the devil mentality and the satanic mentality that divides us. This is related here in Message to the Black Man, chapter 23. Do not get an education just to set it up as some useless, symbolic monument to the black man in the Western Hemisphere. We need an education that eliminates division among us. Acquire an education that creates unity and makes us desire to be with our own. End quote. So let us get right into this introduction to the type of education we need to attain this divine solution. We are instructed in Surah 4, Ayat 135 of the Holy Quran to bear witness with justice. This is further emphasized in the standard of Jay's Temple of Islam, taken also from Surah 17, Ayat 35, regarding the use of al-mazam, the balance, and al-furqan, the discrimination. Each individual bears the right to consider the true history from the factual information available, the divine decrees, Above questionable hearsay of hadith, we are to receive the decisive verses that are the basis of the book in an officially established study regimen, paving the way for a proper understanding of the divine decrees. Our beloved messenger, the glorious, most honorable Elijah Muhammad, teaches us the proper way to ascertain the purity of a religion, a way of life. First, history is all our studies, the most attractive and best qualified to reward our research, as it develops the springs and motives of human actions and displays the consequence of circumstances which operates most powerfully on the destinies of the human being. Second, it stands true that we, the lost-found nation of Islam, in the wilderness of North America, have not applied ourselves to the study of history, but rather to follow. Here we see the messenger clearly instructs that the study of history is key. We should also discuss, consider, and come to a firm resolve of what history is most vital, and whose version of history is most vital, and of how this does not contradict other scriptures, such as Luke chapter 9 verse 62, Philippians chapter 3 verse 12 through 14. In the Nation of Islam, we are taught to forgive, yet not to forget. In Luke chapter 17 verse 1 through 4, and in our Holy Quran, Surah 3, ayat 86 through 91. The messenger further states, they, some students were, having a lot of the bread of idleness, and when an effort was made to the above effect of history study, it was to our detriment by not knowing what history that was more valuable to aid us in the knowledge of our own nation. Then our beloved messenger states regarding study, the wise man is the one who have made a careful study of the past events of ancient and modern history. The knowledge of the future is judged by the knowledge of the past. Then he further teaches us how this qualifies servants to then be used to help educate others, saying there are men born with the gift of prophecy, while some are trained into the knowledge by intense studies of the past events of history. End quote. This type of education, based on the direct word, divine decrees of the Allah Messenger, Amen, is a beautiful orientational foundation to build on a true process of unity. If a group of students sets forth in a sincere desire to establish a righteous goal and are separated due to differences and disagreements, yet are not hostile towards one another, then this leaves a perfect, fertile setting for an eventual future reunification, as there would then always be space and time and opportunity for a greater coming together in the future. This usually works with those who are patient and who do not intrude upon one another's sovereignty. However, when people are impatient and hasty and brutish and imposing, then such imbalances lead to aggression and hostilities. Certainly, the events of the past and present are for effectual study, as they become valuable lessons of history. This is especially true in the lessons of history recorded in the holy books, which also strengthen us and give us the best way to evolve from the old, immature ways of governing that only result in socio-economic and industrial desolation and redundant cycles of failure. We need a proper and divine education that takes us up into the spiritually mature ways of healing that are required to ultimately attain a more pure and effectual way of peaceful coexistence and a possible full reunification in the future, and a more lasting unity that can withstand the test of time. Historically, corrupt nations who vie with their neighbor in covetousness and notice their neighboring nations excelling even go so far as to falsify historic events in order to justify unwarranted aggression upon the sovereign land of others, mostly from a satanic desire to impose, impede, hinder, or pull down the progress of others. The messenger teaches us of the devil's and Satan's tactic of waving the olive branch of unity, while simultaneously harboring ulterior motives as an attempt to bog down the progressive momentum of others. This also is a common tactic of satanic regimes mentioned in Romans chapter 11 verse 24. The true knowledge of self is an effective healing remedy to overcome preoccupation, covetousness, jealousy, and envy over the progress of others. Even still, that knowledge of self must also be organized into a structured order of study and established within, which means it must be accepted, obeyed, implemented, internalized, and applied by the student, which requires it to also first be properly arranged and administered into a divinely prescribed structured order of study, the divinely prescribed study regimen. Then there must also be appointed stewards, administrators, and officials who must in turn be trained, purified, and qualified to conduct each of the official life streams of that structure. Then, with divinely scheduled examination and analysis, staged inspections by commanding officers, officers of the day, and non-commissioned officers of the guard only. This is what the Allah Master J teaching and training of us ultimately comes to produce in the divine decrees. Yet many of us misunderstood this in our training. None of us properly reverenced the totality of the importance of his divine decrees. Yet some understood to a degree. Yet again, most misunderstood initially, which is also natural. This the Allah Master J was well informed of in advance and well prepared for. This is why he gave us his divine decrees, so that when we return to him, his decrees, we can then by his decrees come together the right way, and not the way of the innocently unaware or diabolically deceptive opinions or aversions of any particular student, scribe, captain, or wife, yet according to his divine decrees, which gives us specific detailed instructions of how to administer his teachings and of how the administrators are to be qualified in the eternal 696 principle cycle of time. As such, naturally corruptible, naive, and inexperienced governance is to be expected until we, as written by the guidance of the Divine Supreme Being, are blessed to put on incorruption in the prescribed process of perfection. Such administrational stages cannot be bypassed by any individual, regardless of rank, reputation, or affiliation. Acknowledgement is one of the first steps in this process of perfection. This guarantees an eternally self-perfecting, self-purifying seat of counsel for each inclination, making room in assemblies. Yet pride is the greatest hindrance against such acknowledgement, thus short-circuiting the purifying charge extended to each individual soul in the whole. When the knowledge of self is taken out of context, the student assumes an error that their potential restoration, relation, and connection to the Most High automatically qualifies them to act in the capacity of the Supreme One himself. This perverts the natural vying into unhealthy contention, becoming one with the Supreme One, and being that actual one ourselves, a Supreme One, are actually different stages of the self-perfecting process the Supreme One comes to usher us into. Ultimately, we must all be blessed with a proper balance, al-mazan, for good judgment, and a fine-tuned furqan, way of reasoning, discrimination, discernment, and distinction, to realize that as we are invited up to the throne, stage by stage, to ultimately sit with the Most High, this does not mean that we individually have attained that state to be referred to as all-knowing, all-wise, and supreme. Yet that we each have an opportunity to qualify into the seats of Islamic governing in His kingdom, in the department referred to as the Godhead, Supreme Council, Exalted Assembly. This requires the establishment of not only a study regimen, yet also a rank structure and an examination and analysis process to qualify each soul, drawing them up the ladder in a real way, from rank and file squad member to squad leader, second lieutenant, officer of the guard to first lieutenant, company leader, officer of the day to captain, company commander, commanding officer, ultimately to sit as national, then universal representatives, supreme captains, supreme secretaries, and superior mothers. This should be accomplished with all parties understanding with a fine-tuned balance that rank is only a trial stage of function, mathematically necessary in the train of the Most High. This examination and analysis must be applied in order to see if we are fit to function in the ascending seats of the Godhead, humbling ourselves to the process as self-purifying conduits without corruption and decay. Understanding how the many yet one title, Elohim, relates Romans chapter 12 verse 4 through 20 also to Matthew chapter 6 verse 22, the singular. It is the natural desire of credit for effort that must translate in ascension towards giving all thanks, praise, and glory to the divine supreme being. The word ego is synonymous with the word I. This connects the displacement of a student's understanding of the word I to the corruption of the ego. It is then this corrupt ego that hinders a student's ability to strive for humility and to eventually give full acknowledgement of error. Such has been the way of corrupt regimes in the history of men and mankind. At some point, those who were most zealous in past regimes must face and overcome such demons, which is only achieved by the guidance of the Most Holy Trinity into the way of the noble, when we are blessed to learn from the clear evidence of history. Remember, both heaven and hell are written as having 7 divisions. This number 7 actually represents 7 overall functions of the government that the people are mostly concerned with. The devil is written to divide and conquer. The messenger teaches that when devils see the nations of originals attempting to get together, the devil always positions himself to exacerbate tensions between neighboring nations. We see this internationally with North Korea and South Korea, China and Taiwan, Ethiopia and Sudan. Another great hindrance is failure to acknowledge the lessons of the past, the triumphs, and so-called failures. This should be done in humility, sincerity. The best, most pure way of acknowledgement is by the divine guidance of the holy books, or the divine decrees of God Himself. When we filter our opinions, etc., through the purifying Word of God, to see how our opinions and theories actually line up with the pure spiritual scientific fact. However, some students have not yet been blessed and moved to the level of spiritual maturity to withstand such purification and evolution. This type of acknowledgement is vital in the birth and eternal rebirth of a nation, which is stated in the scripture as producing and reproducing the heavens and the earth. Let us relate this then to our Savior's ability to originate new heavens and new earth. Keeping this one universe throughout eternity requires rebirth. This type of spiritual detox in spiritual evolution is key in the process of spiritual rebirth from the old to the new. It requires a change of environment. That is achieved in essence when we remove titles and ranks and are redeemed and requalified in a refreshment course. This type of rebirth guarantees that we overcome the natural occurrence of decay, rust, and sediment that builds up each cycle. The best rebirth process is rebirth through the divinely established 9 stages of counseling administration through the tapes, divine decrees, through a qualified, experienced, and dedicated council of mothers. The Allah Master J-Man clearly instructs for this type of overseeing administration council to be established by a clear temple process of qualifying function for a prescribed period of time under the close observation and accountability to the Allah Master J-Man decrees and instructions. Checking and rechecking, researching and carefully applying every instruction of the Allah Master J-Man decrees with balance produces this type of counsel and is achieved here at J's Temple of Islam. How do we qualify a true council of elder officials whom the people can trust? Attempting to set up a council of students who are still clinging to the old corrupt viewpoints of the prior regime would only result in a repeat of the same conclusion and shortcomings of the old regime. This would represent a hazard and danger to the lives and salvation of people who seek unto such governing councils for guidance. Attempting to set up a panel of students hurling ideas in a free-for-all of opinion-based objectives that ignore, sweep under the rug, or alter historically documented factual occurrences due to feelings and sentiments would only result in further corruption and chaos. This is why the best way is to establish a standard and a standard holder as the governing ideology, the brain, which in this day is the decrees of the Allah Master J-Man, the Ark of the Covenant, which gives us the clear guidelines and standards that we are to hold the people to in stages. In order to establish the decrees in this way, there must be a dedicated council of students arranged in the specific way the Allah Master J-Man instructs, who strive with sincerity and humility to live by the guidance and instructions of the divine decrees, who are then moved to chronicle, transcribe, and apply the decrees in the specifically prescribed way the Allah Master J-Man puts forth in the decrees. This is the only way to truly establish such a council, and not based on familiarity or sentiment. Attempting to set up a council of students who feel as though they do not need the decrees of the Allah Master J-Man, assuming their opinions are sufficient, and who are in many cases, when compared to the actual way the Allah Master J-Man instructs in his decrees, still clinging to the corrupt viewpoints of the old regime, would only result in a repeat of such stumbles. To illustrate the danger of attempting to set up such sentiment-based governance, imagine a group of students being accepted into medical school. Some will remain dedicated, while others may realize that being a medical professional is not for them. Some may be comfortable being a nurse. Some may strive to become a bona fide physician. What is the governing council that qualifies, certifies, and gives them their accreditation? This only comes by the governing standards given by the Allah Master J-Man in the decrees. Then it is natural that some students may assume that they want to be paramedics. Yet upon getting into the field, they may realize that they prefer to work in the pharmacy. Some may desire to get a little experience in each field, and some may fall victim to other distractions. In our natural youthfulness, some of us enroll in college, then fall victim to extracurricular distractions, whether partying or dating. Some have other issues with extended family, etc. In some cases, this causes students to drop out. Yet, they should not then lie and attempt to change history and tell others they graduated. In truth, they should simply re-enroll. In some cases, they can get credit for past achievements. However, if they enrolled in a particular class, in grade level, etc., and did not actually officially qualify and graduate that level, according to the standard of the governing establishments and not according to their personal viewpoint of the class subjects, then they would have to take those classes over again. This also is natural. In such cases, many older adults simply re-enroll in school and finish whatever course of learning they desire, and grow on to attain their certified degree, to now act and function, so-called practice, in that field as a professional. In such cases of general education, this is natural. Yet only when the accrediting establishment is respected as an authority on the subject of accreditation. Now imagine that same group of students enrolling, joyously going through orientation together. Yet over time, some fall away due to extracurricular concerns, which is natural. They can always re-enroll later. Some fall away after getting preoccupied with partying and dating, which is also natural. They also can always re-enroll again later, as long as they are honest with themselves. Then some may even fall away or get kicked out due to corruption and repeated violations. Even still, this is also a natural occurrence in some cases, and they also should be given an opportunity to re-enroll later, as long as they are honest, sincere, and acknowledging. Certainly, they would not come back as doctors and instructors. They all must be real about their standing at the time they fell away. Yet imagine a group of students who fell away or were kicked out due to repeated violations, who waited until the founder goes out of town to connect the school to higher forms of medical science. And they come back demanding to be respected as doctors and instructors, threatening and even attacking the officials of the establishment simply because they would not allow them to corrupt the establishment in that way. Wouldn't that be a travesty? Yet this is what has occurred with many nations. However, everyone does not have such violations. Some just fell away due to other natural concerns. Therefore, their situation is different. However, it would still be dangerous to gather them back and automatically say they are instructors due to sentiment, or simply because we are familiar with them from back in the days. Here's the danger. Imagine another student who falls away due to family concerns, which is natural. They make some effort to remain connected and continue their education from a distance. Yet soon, their attendance drops and they fall behind. Then that same student goes forth and gathers many of the other students, which is good, especially if they innocently gathered everyone and encouraged everyone to re-enroll. However, as they attempt to do this, some feel passionately that they should be automatically respected as authorities and even doctors, guides, and instructors. So the other student sympathizes with them and concedes and agrees with them and helps them establish a group of their own outside the original establishment that is already established. This is their right. Every group has a right to establish what they think is the right way. Then we should respect each other's establishment as sovereign groups. We should not try to force ourselves upon one another. However, as stated, this has occurred and is occurring with many nations. Some innocently separated over time, others separated due to corruption. Then some are mixed. In the case of regimes that were separated due to corruption, some from the corrupt regime may harbor envy and secretly seek always to twist an agenda to drum up a reason for opposition and aggression. Now in truth, the real and imminent danger is this. When members of a corrupt regime, such as the Romans who attempted to crucify the truth bearer, claim they have all of the sudden had a change of heart, while secretly still harboring such corruption, then set up a council of knights to to establish a corrupt version of the teachings of the very truth bearer they attempted to crucify, conveniently appealing to the weakness of all who fell away by saying that everyone is forgiven of corruption, even without having to acknowledge such corruption. Sounds familiar? This is what they did with the teachings of Imam Isa. And this is what they are attempting to do with the teachings of the Allah Master J Man today. Can fallen students ever be truly redeemed? Yes. Redemption is a process we all must use, as we all fall short of the glory to some degree. Certainly, this is best achieved by a factually researched, confirmed, and validated process of rebirth, attempting to gather former students according to sentiment and not according to an actual documented history of consistent, humble, and sincere function in obedience to the Allah Master J Man's instructions, overseen by a counsel who has successfully been taken through the process themselves, is the best way. With all parties involved submitting themselves humbly to a transparent process of examination by having all things in common. The high accountability process established by the Allah Master J Man eliminates room for such decay, thus guaranteeing each student an opportunity for pure rebirth. Step-by-step function in a rank structure established in accord with the Nation of Islam as defined by the Allah Master J Man on decree, with scheduled examination and analysis each cycle, all students coming through detox, an abolition of old misperceptions and old impediments to be born again through the divine decrees in a sober-minded way, which is through a pure womb cleaned up. Refusing this process and assuming we know, according to old misperceptions of the teachings, only taints the future potential of the new regime. We see clear evidence of this in the ego-driven, male-dominated perspectives of the old corrupt regimes in the nations of the East, who cling to warring against their neighbor and who hamstring and dominate over and abuse the wives, mothers, and women of their own nation, having violent abusers from an old corrupt regime who refuse to acknowledge or denounce their corrupt policies is a bad idea. Whether in the Middle East, Nigeria, South Africa, South America, infested by the old thinking from the corrupt British, Scottish, Greek, Italian, French, Portuguese, or the corrupt German regimes from the Nazi era, or the corrupt regime from the Confederate era, or the Jim Crow era. Either way, we must all acknowledge that we could be harboring some of those old ideologies by humbly reprocessing through a step-by-step refreshment course to be truly healed, examined, qualified, which today the Allah Master J Man himself will guide us through in his decrees. Those who at one time professed the policies of a corrupt regime can be redeemed. However, they would need to be detoxed of the poisonous perspective that drove them to adopt the corrupt policies of their prior regime. The Allah Master J Man has well prepared for Satan's attempt to repeat that history among his students by giving us divine decrees that clearly emphasize open acknowledgement in order for any student to be healed and restored to function in positions awaiting them. This is why today he teaches that there must be an antitypical atonement. This way, if student still has a sincere passion to be a true helper in the field of healing others, they should not want to endanger others by refusing to humble themselves to this purifying healing process the Allah Master J Man invites them to receive in his open arms here at Jay's Temple of Islam. Sajadalahu and Assalamu alaikum to the degree of the Creator's master plan.